let's talk about one of my favorite commander decks, Sheldon the Commander. It's an Aikido deck that's not only incredibly fun to play, but has also taught me far more about Commander than any other deck. If cards like this, or this get you excited, and you like the idea of asking your friends why they're hitting themselves as you use their own cards against them, then you're in the right place. Stick around and you'll leave with a sick new deck to torment your friends with, and hopefully you'll also leave with a new perspective on Commander. My journey with this deck started in late 2023 when Sheldon Menery sadly passed away. For those that may not know him, Sheldon is the reason this format exists, and is indirectly thus the reason that you're watching this video. I was never lucky enough to have met him, but the resounding positive impact he had and the pouring out of love and appreciation for him after his passing led me to spending time reading up on his impact on Commander, including his notorious "You Did This to Yourself" deck, helmed by Ruhan of the Formori. Ruhan is a 4-mana Jeskai giant warrior that's a beefy 7/7 and randomly attacks an opponent each combat. But as you'll soon find out, Ruhan isn't really the star of the show when it comes to this Commander deck. As a serial brewer with the self-belief or delusion that I can improve on almost any deck, I toyed with the idea of giving this deck a fresh coat of paint as an ode to the man who gave us so much. A few months later, when Wizards announced the Sheldon Spellbook Secret Lair in support of charity, my idea was just to lay a random collection of cards in my Moxfield deck graveyard, but seeing a special Sheldon skin version of his infamous Commander provided the much needed motivation for me to finally commit to finishing the brew. Brewing this deck was a journey, because while it's now one of my favorite decks that has recently survived a big cut to my collection, I really wasn't happy with it for quite a while. Part of what needed to change was the deck, but also part of what needed to change was me. The latter part is something I'll talk a bit about more after we take a look at the deck in more detail. This is the only deck I own where the Commander isn't the focal point. If you've watched any of my other brew videos, you'll know that most of my brews are razor sharp, and many rely heavily on the mechanics of the Commander. Here, I play Ruhan, or Sheldon, not because he's absolutely cracked or because I built around him. I play him because Sheldon Menery did. Now, Sheldon can be a fun and funny threat, as emphasized by the fact that he randomly attacked the same friend of mine about 18 times in a row across a handful of games, and as a 7/7 commander, he can close games out, but that's not his primary function. His primary function here is flavor. The rest of the deck, however, is laser focused on one particular thing, and that's chaos. But I don't mean one of those cringy chaos decks that shuffle everyone's permanents into a big pile and make you reconsider who you keep as friends. This, like any good Aikido deck, aims to use your opponent's strengths, momentum, and transgressions against them. Whenever a player taps a land, or casts a spell, or turns a creature sideways to attack, I want them sweating, worrying about what I might have in store for them. The deck's goal is not to win the game. That's just a nice bonus if it happens. Instead, the goal is to create as many unexpected moments as possible. If I were to rename my version of Sheldon's iconic deck, I can't think of a better name to embody our game plan than Call an Ambulance, but not for me. So with all that in mind, let's take a look at some of the cards that make up this deck. The first category of cards to look at is cards that mess with shit, starting with the classic Deflecting Palm, which is a 2-mana instant that prevents damage and redirects it back at the person who committed the crime. I then have a New Way Forward, a 5-mana spell that is essentially the same thing, but also allows me to draw a whole bunch of cards. Comeuppance is similar, but deals with more than one target. Next we have a few spells that mess with targets, like Untimely Malfunction. The primary reason that I run it is for the ability to change the target of a spell, but opening the way for either my or an opponent's attacking creatures is also highly underrated. Another redirect spell in our arsenal is, unsurprisingly, Redirect. And we also have a Will's Reversal, which allows us to potentially high roll and gain an extra copy of the spell. That fits the theme of unexpected high roll moments that we hunt for in this deck absolutely perfectly. Narset's Reversal gives us a copy of a spell and bounces the original back to its owner's hand. And Sudden Substitution is a really cool bargaining and politics tool, swapping a non-creature spell with a creature, and all of that at split-second speed. I absolutely love split-second spells because there's no room for others to interfere with my grand designs. Tempt with Mayhem doesn't change the target of a spell, but it does create some fun politics and some potentially wacky scenarios, like turning someone's Cultivate into a table-wide ramp spell, and getting a handful of copies of that spell for you. And even better when it's something more impactful like a removal or card draw spell. Chef's Kiss really leans into the chaos dynamic, redirecting harmful spells like removal, and Invert Polarity is a counterspell that gives us a chance to steal that spell all for 3 mana, which is pretty good. Next up are two of my favorite spells in the deck. Role Reversal allows us to swap 2 creatures, like swapping two commanders between two players and watching them squirm to try to figure out how to kill their own commanders to get them back. Modify Memory does the same thing, only it also allows us to get some hefty card draw at the same time. Cultural Exchange does the same thing, only for as many creatures as we want, and can be a great bargaining tool to deal with the powerful player. Next up are a few random spells. The first is an incredibly versatile card in Galadriel's Dismissal. It can either protect something or temporarily deal with a threat, or can do that for an entire board. It's a great fog, but it's also a great way to clear the way for another player to knock a different player out. Angel's Grace is the ultimate oh shit button, that both has split second and can stop someone from winning or keep us alive in a pinch. Watching someone thinking they're about to win and commit to the play, only for you to play Angel's Grace, allowing the table to Uno reverse them on the next turn, is absolutely hilarious. We have Teferi's Protection, which is mainly here as part of Sheldon's Secret Lair. And then lastly we have Mana Drain, which I primarily use to generate a lot of mana, especially to punish an opponent who is ramped out early and has cast a very expensive spell. We then have some crowd control spells that help us deal with creatures. The first of which is Solar Blaze, that has each creature deal damage to itself equal to its power. We then have Spiteful Banditry, which is more of a conventional deal X damage spell, and the main reason we run it is to punish our greedy opponents by generating treasures whenever one of their creatures die. We also run Blasphemous Act, again because it punishes overextended boards, dealing 13 damage to each creature. You may have noticed that all three of these deal damage, and that's because we also run Repercussion. Repercussion does double duty in this deck. Firstly, it's a great way of creating hijinks as blockers become a lot less useful, but more importantly, pairing it with one of our damage spells creates an absolutely wild win condition. If you're enjoying this, I make videos like this that help you think differently about Commander. Videos that will help you build better decks, play better, and have more fun. If you want more of that, like the video to tell the algorithm that you think it's good, and subscribe to help me in my quest to reach 100,000 subscribers, and far more importantly, to make sure that my next banger gets delivered directly into your eyeballs. The next category of spells are ones that copy your opponent's stuff. These give us some proactive plays on our turn in a deck otherwise filled with instant speed shenanigans, and these cards are also one of the main ways that we can progress the game state and affect life totals. The first is Clever Impersonator. The cool thing about him is that he can copy any permanent, so when you have him in hand, it'll be one of those rare times that you'll actually be happy to see an opponent play the One Ring. Flesh Duplicate is an incredibly cheap way to copy a big scary threat. Yes, it doesn't stick around, but with the right creature, like an Ancient Copper Dragon or a Tali, 2 turns of swinging is more than enough, especially for 2 mana. Dax Duplicate also allows us to copy a creature, only it comes in with haste and dethrone. Mockingbird also copies, but comes in with flying, as does Malleable Imposter, only it also has flash as well. C Double can do some really cool stuff, either allowing you to copy any spell or a creature that's already on the board. Alminster Simulacrum allows you to create a copy of each of your opponent's scariest thing, all at instant speed, which either mid-combat or at the end of a turn cycle before you untap can greatly swing the tempo of a game. And lastly in this category we have Mimic Vat, which can allow you to repeatedly recur a very problematic card. When it comes to ramp, we've got a bunch of mana rocks like Talismans, Signets, and of course the Sheldon Menery Sol Ring. Next up is our sources of card draw, and most of these also interact with our opponents in some way. Illusory Ambusher does a great get behind me Mr. President impression as they flash in to block a big scary creature and net us a bunch of cards in the process. Body of Knowledge isn't quite as flashy, but can get quite beefy and draw us cards repeatedly, which often means that people just don't want to attack into us unless they're hoping to kill us in a single turn. Secret Rendezvous allows us to make a deal and give ourselves and an opponent some much needed card advantage. And Trouble in Pairs allows us to use our opponents who do far too much as a source of resources and give us much needed cards. Next up is Keep Watch, which is a decent way to draw 2 to 3 cards in the mid game, but if someone goes wide in a token deck, can do some truly hilarious things. Decoy Gambit and Seize the Spotlight both do a similar thing, giving our opponents a choice that'll often result in us drawing a bunch of cards. Next up are 2 cards that, while they don't fit the Aikido style that well, help smooth out how the deck plays much more, and the first is Jeskai Ascendancy, which can help us dig through our library each time we play a non-creature spell, and can also help to untap Sheldon if we need a blocker. Whirlwind of Thought does the same thing but just a little bit better in drawing us a card instead of looting. When it comes to removal, I don't run much regular removal like Swords or Path in this deck, because I want the removal that I do have to be somewhat thematic. With that in mind, I do have Condemn that deals with an attacking creature, and Aloran's Searing Light that deals with the biggest creatures on the board and can deal some damage to progress the game. in place of that regular removal, I run a lot of stuff that messes with combat. This category of cards really helps us to progress the game, and in certain instances can win the game for us even in a 1v1 setting. The first of these is one of the very few 3 mana cost rocks that I will consider playing, and that's Misleading Signpost, as it allows us to send a cheeky attacking creature at someone else. Portal Mage does exactly the same thing, except Stracto Creature and Portal Manipulator and Windshaper Planetar do something similar, only for an entire board. Domineering Will allows us to steal someone else's creatures and use them as blockers. Or you can politic and do that for someone else. That can even result in the spell being a pseudo removal spell. Reigns of Power is an absolute banger and the ultimate call and ambulance, but not for me card. We run very few creatures, so often that means getting a massive board of big scary stuff in exchange for very little. It's a great way to use our opponent's strength against them, and probably the strongest win condition we have in a 1v1 situation. Next up is Take the Bait, which allows us to fend off an attack and send it at someone else. Illusionist's Gambit does something very similar. Next up is Master Warcraft, which gives us the ability to open the way for a big attack and is a great politics tool. Call for Aid is a little like Reigns for Power, but not as strong, but still allows us to turn an opponent's strong board into an asset for ourselves. Last but not least in this category, we have Spectacular Showdown, which can be an amazing politics piece if you want to give one of your opponent's creatures double strike. We can also use it on Sheldon, or overload it and close out the game. I'm not going to spend too much time on lands because the mana base is pretty straightforward, and you can have a look at the list that's linked in the description for that if you want. But we have Core Haven and Maze of Ith that help us deal with problematic large attackers. You may have noticed that I don't include cards like Rhystic Study, Smothering Tithe, Propaganda, or Windborne Muse. Stack's effects, however minor, not to mention the power shift and frustration caused by constantly asking whether people are paying for the triggers, means I didn't want the vibe brought down by cards like this. I want this deck to be purely focused on good vibes and improving the fun of the game. The improved vibes are my win condition, and in this environment, a card like Smothering Tithe or Rhystic Study just doesn't really fit the bill. With all that in mind, let's look at how to play the deck. I believe that the best moments in Commander are moments where tension is built up and then released. To draw a comparison, you know those big plot twist moments in wrestling? Like when someone appears from under the ring, only to dive off the top rope or grab a chair and change the fight completely? When you're piloting this deck, that's you hiding under the ring. Only there's not one of you, there's about 10 that appear across the fight. The game plan is to create tension and hijinks and use your opponent's stuff to impact the game. Copying a big creature or commandeering a game-breaking spell may sometimes result in a win, but more often than not you'll end up in second or third place. Having a good time with this deck means you want to embrace the chaos and make plays not because they're the most optimal to win, but because they create the most fun. Given how reactive this deck is, it presents you with both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that beyond having enough mana or ramp in your opening hand, it really doesn't matter what else you have, because your game plan is almost entirely dependent on what your opponents do. The curse is that unlike most decks that have a very defined plan that allow you to have some sort of map of what you're doing and where you're going, this deck doesn't have that. Where others are coloring within the lines, we're drawing a new picture every game. If you're a newer player, that could leave you feeling a little bit lost, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because you have to be lost to be found. It was this lack of focus and lack of clear direction that I really struggled with for a while when I was brewing this deck, because often the deck just didn't do what I wanted. Some of that was underperforming cards that got swapped out, but some of that was also because ultimately my game plan was to mess with the game and then win. This was a play pattern that my die-hard control player mindset just couldn't seem to shake, and it took learning to let go of that desire to win, to be free and simply enjoy the game. Living in the moment is a hell of a drug, and in brewing and subsequently playing this deck, I was reminded of some of the things that others shared about Sheldon after his passing that made him stand out. A fierce love of the game of Magic, particularly of Commander being a casual format, not a hyper-competitive one. A format where it was spending time with people and connecting with people that really mattered. Commander wasn't so much the point itself, but rather a vehicle to spend time with friends or to make new ones. Inviting friends new and old to spend time bonding over meals after a few games was as or more important to Sheldon as getting a game of Commander in itself. And I'm reminded by his flavor text every time I pick him up. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, and the older one gets, the more one becomes aware of how finite our lives are and how little time we really have. Or it could be because someone that had a massive impact on my life in a very short space of time recently passed away very unexpectedly. But it really makes one think about one's priorities and how we choose to spend our time. I play Commander for fun. Winning the game is great, but it's a nice to have. I'm also not playing Commander solely because I want to play the game. Some of my worst Commander experiences have been committing to a game with a group of people I wouldn't have wanted to have spent time with were it not for the desire to sling some cardboard. Instead, I prioritize playing with people I vibe with and enjoy. And if I'm sitting at a table with new or old friends whose company I enjoy, then that's what winning truly looks like. The journey of brewing this deck, learning more about Sheldon, and ultimately perfecting and piloting it has given me a much bigger appreciation for living in the moment while playing Commander. And no deck that I own creates more fun, more hijinks, or more memories than this deck does. If I could prescribe one thing, it would be to try this deck or a similar deck that isn't optimized to win, but is instead optimized for fun. If you've enjoyed this, pay the algorithm gods by liking and subscribing, and go check out either my recent Vincent deck that I built for Matt Mercer, or my Aragorn Spellslinger deck. And let me know in the comments if there's a great card that I've missed, or if you've got a take about pursuing fun and vibes in Commander. And as always, thank you for being here.